What's the biggest WTF thing a spoiled adult did that bankrupted their parents? Story 1. My younger brother, Luca, is the kind of spoiled adult who thinks a ring light is a personality. 2 years ago, he announced he was launching a creator house in our sleepy town. Translation: he signed a warehouse lease with a tokenized community investment scheme and bullied our parents into co-signing because banks hate innovators. Mom brought biscotti to the signing. Dad wore his only suit. They thought it was a gym. It cratered in 6 months. The house was an echoing box with neon letters and a blown fuse. He kept doubling down, buying cameras on credit, renting a BMW for brand alignment, and minting NFTs of his face. When invoices started arriving with my parents' names on them, he blocked the numbers. When the landlord sued, he said, "Civil court is content." The ugliest day was the 341 meeting, the creditor examination before the bankruptcy trustee. We sat under fluorescent lights while strangers flipped through our family's mistakes. The trustee asked Luca for a list of assets. He shrugged, hood up, and, God help me, started a TikTok live. POV: they're trying to cancel an entrepreneur, he said to 2,000 viewers. The trustee told him to stop. He didn't. Then chat went feral. A viewer commented, "Isn't that your cold wallet on stream?" Someone clipped an old video where Luca bragged about a hardware wallet taped under my desk. The landlord's lawyer pulled up the clip in real time. The trustee's eyebrows climbed to heaven. They paused the meeting, sent a marshal to the warehouse, and came back with a roll of duct tape, a ledger, and a sick little smile. Turns out, his community investment wallet had enough crypto to wipe out 1/3 of the debts. He'd kept it quiet so his brand wouldn't look broke. The trustee called it concealment. Luca called it market timing. The judge called it fraud adjacent. When we left, Mom's hands were shaking so hard her keys chimed. "He's still my baby," she whispered, like apologizing to the air. At dinner, Dad finally asked him to apologize. Luca looked at his phone and said, "You should be thanking me. Views tripled. Here's the punch." A week later, the trustee filed an adversary proceeding naming not just Luca, but any co-signers who knew or should have known about the scheme. And the investigator. She was the same TikTok viewer who doxed the wallet. Turns out she was the landlord's daughter. She DM'd me after, "I'm sorry it had to be public." He made it public. My parents are in bankruptcy now. Luca still streams. The ring light is bright enough to hide everyone else's darkness. Story 2. I married into money that wasn't mine. My ex, Tara, had parents who solved problems with checks and threats. Tara never met a boundary she couldn't overdraw. When our daughter Lily was born, Tara outsourced motherhood like a project. Night nurse, infant stylist, and a curated nursery that looked like a museum. The bill went to her parents. When I protested, her mother said, "We invest in excellence." After years of being the unglamorous parent, packing lunches, going to parent-teacher conferences alone, I filed for divorce. I assumed we'd split 50-50. Tara assumed she'd win 100-0 by attrition. Her parents hired a litigation boutique that bills by the minute and sigh. They moved to terminate my joint legal rights because I lacked taste. They subpoenaed my therapist. They demanded Lily's pediatrician produce growth charts since birth to disprove claims of paternal competence. We lived on a treadmill made of motions. Every time I thought we'd reached a settlement, Tara added a new demand. International travel approvals, a stylist for court, a private evaluator flown in from New York. Her parents refinanced their lake house to keep the war going. I sold my car to pay my lawyer and learned bus routes like prayers. The hallway outside courtroom 5C became our second home. Lily turned 8 in that hallway with a cupcake from the vending machine. The judge finally appointed a guardian ad litem. In interviews, Lily repeated phrases I'd never heard from her. "Daddy's home is cramped and the lighting is depressive." The gal's report hinted at coaching. Tara looked triumphant. Then Lily asked to speak to the judge in chambers. I had no idea what she'd say. When they returned, the judge looked older. He scheduled a final hearing and told us to bring our calendars. On the last day, Tara's lawyer swaggered. Then the judge read from a letter written in gel pen. "Dear Judge, Mommy's parents say they will buy us a better daddy. But I only want the one I already have. They make Mommy tell me to say things. I don't like saying things that aren't true." He paused. "And I am tired." The order awarded me primary physical custody. Tara was given supervised visitation until she completed a parenting course. The grandparents were barred from contact during visits due to undue influence. The day after the ruling, their counsel filed a notice. The grandparents' second mortgage had defaulted. They'd bankrupted themselves trying to buy a verdict. I walked Lily to the bus the next morning. She held my hand tight and said, "Can we get the cramped lighting fixed?" We laughed like people who could finally afford bulbs. Story 3. I was the accounts receivable clerk at D'Alessio Contractors. 30 employees, 2 ancient coffee makers, and a founder who treated us like nieces and nephews. Then Marco, the founder's actual son, came back from a startup sabbatical with loafers that cost more than my car. He got a title, VP of Strategy, and a glass office. Strategy looked a lot like naps. Soon, invoices started spiking. New vendors appeared. Aurum Solutions, Blue Peak Consulting, Vendor 47. The amounts were oddly round and always urgent. I asked to onboard them properly. Marco waved it off. Confidential. Government bid prep. Mr. D'Alessio, who still wore the same lucky watch from 1989, co-signed checks with a tired smile. "He's the future," he told me. One night I stayed late to reconcile. A wire to Vendor 47 bounced, then cleared after a call from Marco. The bank bounced back a partial name, VND47 LLC. Curiosity killed most cats. It made me open the state business registry. VND47's manager was an alias tied to a Vegas address. The registered agent? Marco. I printed everything and walked it to the founder's office. He read silently, then closed his eyes and rubbed the watch like a rosary. The next morning, he called an all-hands. "We've engaged an outside auditor," he said. Marco wasn't there, nor were the petty cash envelopes. Halfway through the meeting, men in windbreakers walked in with a warrant. They went straight to Marco's glass office and left with a desktop and 2 duffel bags. We watched through the glass like fish. Marco showed up 15 minutes later, tanned and confused, then saw the jackets and tried to pivot to a joke. No one laughed. The audit found $1.8 million siphoned through fake vendors to online sports books and client entertainment. The line item for client turned out to be Marco. The company lost lines of credit. Payrolls stretched like taffy. D'Alessio liquidated his retirement to keep us paid 1 more month. Then he quietly filed Chapter 11. Here's the part that still hits. At the creditors' meeting, the old man, voice shaking, took responsibility. "I trusted my son," he said. "That is my mistake." Marco's lawyer nodded like it was weather. A week later, Marco posted Ibiza photos with a caption, "Can't bankrupt the vibe." Comments were turned off. I got a job at a competitor. On my first day, I found a familiar watch on my desk with a note, "For someone who watches." It was a replica. The real one? Sold to make payroll. The man who treated us like family lost his business protecting actual family. That's the kind of bankruptcy that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. Story 4. We planned a tasteful wedding. Mia planned Versailles. Her parents had always picked up the tab on her taste. Gap year that lasted 3, an apartment where the rent was a networking expense, handbags that arrived like holidays. I'm a teacher. My splurge is extra pencils. By month 2 of planning, there was a champagne wall that needed its own permit, a string quartet augmented by a DJ to read the room, and a dress with a name longer than some poems. Each time I hesitated, Mia said, "Relax. My parents live for this." They nodded, tight-lipped, and handed over another black card. 2 weeks before the wedding, her mom called me by accident. Pocket dial, maybe karma. I heard, Move the balance to the HELOC, and he'll never see the statements. I walked into the living room with my phone still warm and asked Mia, "Are we putting this on your parents' house?" She flicked through centerpiece options. It's their gift. The day arrived. White flowers everywhere, an aisle like a runway. The officiant asked for the rings. The quartet paused. The DJ swiveled. Then the venue manager speed walked down the side aisle and whispered to her headset. The lights dimmed, but not on purpose. The power company had cut us to essential when the card on file declined enough times to trigger a fraud hold and a very real unpaid bill. The champagne wall went flat. The DJ went silent. The string quartet kept sawing like the Titanic band. Whispers rose. Mia hissed at her mom. Her dad stared at the floor. I pulled out the emergency folder my lawyer friend insisted I bring, final invoices, a copy of the prenup Mia hadn't really read. I took the mic that no longer worked, raised my voice, and said, "We need to pause. I was told this wedding was a gift. The gift is a second mortgage on your parents' house I learned about by accident." Gasps. Mia's face did something I'd never seen. I read the prenup clause. Debts incurred prior to marriage remain the responsibility of the incurring party and any co-obligors. That means your parents, not me, I said. But they can't afford it. I placed the ring on the podium and told her I couldn't do it. Not the marriage. The story we were telling on other people's backs. Her mother started to cry the way bank statements cry, silent and in columns. Her father nodded once, like a man finally allowed to be small. I walked out into daylight. Later that night, Mia posted a black square with "Everything happens for a reason." The next day, her parents filed for bankruptcy. The twist? The venue manager sent me an email. Mia had paid for a secret suite for her ex for content. It was on the same card that got declined. The only story 5. I'm 16. My dad calls himself a serial improver. The neighborhood calls him Permit Guy, as in the guy who never pulls one. He grew up spoiled. Grandma and Grandpa paid for his mistakes like they were subscriptions. When he and Mom split, he moved back into their house, temporarily. Temporary became 4 years, 2 half-finished additions, and an outdoor kitchen the HOA tried to smite with emails. Fines stacked up. Unapproved structure, noise violations from his midnight work sprints, a dirt pile that achieved landmark status. Each letter went to my grandparents. Each time, Grandpa wrote a check. He'd say, "He's my son." Grandma would say nothing and stir her tea like it was thick. Then my phone buzzed with the family group chat. Aunt Rosa posted, "Emergency HOA meeting tonight." Dad replied, "Lowell, bring popcorn." I biked over. The clubhouse smelled like old coffee and power. The board projected a spreadsheet, $84,000 in fines, legal fees, and liens, all tied to my grandparents' property because Dad had filed permits in Grandpa's name to speed things up. Dad smirked. Technicalities. The HOA lawyer said the lien was moving to foreclosure. Grandma's hands trembled. Grandpa stared at the floor tile like it might explain something. I did the only thing a teenager can do. I opened the receipts. Last summer, Dad had borrowed my laptop to print a label and left his email open. I'd screenshotted everything because I didn't trust my memory. Quotes from contractors titled, "Cash for no permit." Messages to a guy named Miggs about flipping a hot tub on Facebook Marketplace. And a thread where he bragged, "Even if they foreclose, the old folks will bail me." I airdropped the folder to the HOA projector. The room went quiet, like snow. On the screen, Dad's messages, date-stamped, emoji-laden, gross. He lunged for my phone. Aunt Rosa stepped between us, and Grandma stood up, tiny, steady, and said, "Enough." The next week, something twisted. The foreclosure notice arrived, but so did a second envelope. Grandpa had met with a lawyer months ago. He'd quietly moved the deed into an irrevocable trust that excluded Dad as a beneficiary. The lien could attach to Dad's interest, which was now 0. The house? Safe. The price? They had to file bankruptcy to strip the liens and reorganize. Grandma had sold her wedding pearls to pay the attorney. Dad packed a bag and left for a buddy's place. He texted me, "Can't believe you did that to family." I stared at the screen and typed, "Grandma and Grandpa are my family." The twist landed the next morning. A voicemail from a different lawyer. "Grandma's. Your grandparents updated their will. If you want it, the house will be yours to finish, with permits." I walked to school past the dirt pile, now marked with orange tape. Maybe bankruptcy was the price of keeping what mattered. Maybe the only thing worth inheriting is the lesson. Story 6. I'm the senior counselor at a public high school where our most valuable currency is trust. In October, a former student named Damien swept in wearing a watch that ticked louder than his conscience. He announced the Horizon Scholars Fund, a $50,000 annual award seeded by my family to help first-gen kids level up. He handed me glossy brochures and a link to donate. Alumni gave. Teachers tithed. The principal cried. By January, we'd raised $180,000. Then little things went sideways. The tax receipts were homemade. The foundation's EIN on the brochure didn't show up in the IRS database. When I asked Damien for paperwork, he forwarded PDFs with signatures from his parents as officers. The signatures looked too smooth, like someone had traced love until it became theft. I called his mother. She spoke softly, chemo raspy, and said, "What foundation?" Then silence. Then, "He promised it was temporary. He said people do this all the time." She hung up. At the next school board meeting, we confronted Damien. He rolled in with a photographer and a speech about impact. Our treasurer projected bank statements. The donations took a 2-day detour through the Horizon account, then bled into Damien's brand agency, a lease for a luxury loft, and 3 first-class tickets to Tulum. He smirked and said the money was invested so it could earn for next year's scholars. A board member dialed the state AG from the dais. Damien's parents arrived halfway through, both of them gray with the kind of fear that ages you mid-step. His mother held a plastic grocery bag of crumpled receipts and a single page. A power of attorney Damien had made her sign the day after chemo. "So I can handle bills." The trustee later said that gave him control to open accounts in their names. The IRS said the foundation was a fiction. The penalties were not. The clawbacks landed like anvils on the parents' credit. They filed for bankruptcy in March. Graduation came anyway. We found a real donor to fund 2 scholarships. The valedictorian looked out at the crowd and said, "I want to thank the families who gave, even when they didn't mean to." There was a murmur, then a rustle, as a deputy walked Damien out of the back row when his phone lit up with a wire alert. The twist? The donor who saved the fund was Damien's mother. She listed the scholarship in her bankruptcy as an unsecured pledge and still paid $500 from her disability check. On the memo line, she wrote, "For the kids you promised. I've never seen a check cut both ways like that." Story 7. On day 1 of the Love and Lobster itinerary, a woman in tulle and spray tan marched up to my desk. "I'm the bride," she said, brandishing a lanyard that said bride, like it came with a siren. Behind her trailed a groom who looked like a substitute teacher and parents clutching the kind of silence that costs interest. The bride, Savannah, had booked 50 cabins for a destination wedding. Her parents' Amex was on every reservation for convenience. We see this sometimes. Money greases, love slips. By day 3, her party had a private bartender, upgraded their staterooms, and rented the top deck for a rehearsal that looked like a music video. I processed the authorizations and smiled like hospitality demands. The parents signed receipts without reading. The morning of the wedding, my terminal flashed a code I've learned to hate: multiple chargebacks. Overnight, the cardholder, Savannah's father, had disputed everything as fraud. Policy meant we froze onboard accounts and requested immediate alternative payment. The florist's cooler breathed against my ankles while the officiant checked his watch. I paged the father to the purser's office. He arrived with his wife, eyes wet and wild. He whispered, "I didn't do that." She did. We pulled the logs. The disputes came from his banking app at 3:11 a.m. CCTV showed Savannah on the promenade at 3:10, phone in hand, laugh breathing with a bridesmaid. Banks just reverse it if you cry. By noon, the venue was unpaid, the accounts were locked, and the ship's lawyer had printed the clause that makes people blink. Services delivered must be paid, or the ship may detain the passenger at port. Savannah screamed that we were ruining her content. The groom stared at the carpet's waves like they might carry him away. Here's the twist. We didn't escort Savannah anywhere. We escorted her parents. Maritime law and the cardholder agreement meant the liability stuck to them, not the princess who'd solved money by dragging it into reverse. They signed a promissory note with trembling hands while the captain radioed the port agent. The wedding happened in the atrium without power to the DJ booth. The bouquet was a dozen napkins. As they posed, the groom's mother slipped me a thank you for keeping it small. When we docked, a process server met us with a civil complaint from the cruise line's headquarters. Savannah tried to throw the bouquet at him. He handed the summons to her father instead. He took it, eyes wet and wild again, and said to his daughter, "I raised you to think the ocean was big and the bill was small. I was wrong." Story 8. Our church is the kind that counts casseroles as currency. We run a food pantry and a winter shelter with more love than spreadsheets. Then Anthony returned from faith-based rehab with a vision. Turn the vacant parsonage into a sober living home called Second Chances. He was the pastor's nephew, overpromised since birth. His parents, pillars with platinum cards, offered to co-sign the renovation loan so the ministry can launch fast. The board voted yes after Anthony cried in the fellowship hall about men like me who need a bed and a Bible. We borrowed $220,000 against the parsonage. His parents guaranteed it. He posted renderings with Edison bulbs and a neon grace sign. I kept the books and prayed over invoices labeled Consulting and Influencer Launch. By spring, the parsonage had a new deck and a busted permit. City inspectors flagged zoning. Anthony waved them off. Religious use is exempt. It wasn't. Fines compounded daily. We paid $2, then $4, then stopped counting. Meanwhile, the pantry fridge died. We hand-wrote IOUs to the produce man. One Sunday, a boy in a superhero t-shirt tugged my sleeve. "Mr. Ben," he said, "my dad says Uncle Anthony's house is for parties." He pulled out a phone and showed me TikToks. Aftercare nights that looked like velvet rope lounges, a cash cover at the door. There was the neon Grace glowing behind $18 mocktails. The cover went to a Zelle account named after Anthony's mother. I brought the videos to the board. The pastor's hands shook. Anthony called it community outreach and said the cover covered worship supplies. The city called it an illegal venue. Our lender called the loan. His parents were on the hook. They mortgaged their retirement condo and still came up short. Bankruptcy was filed in their names, not his. He pivoted to a GoFundMe where he wrote, "Religious persecution is real." Comments were limited. At the next potluck, the room felt shy. The pantry shelves were bare. Anthony's mother set down a dish and said, small as a prayer, "He told us it would make him whole." The pastor cleared his throat to read a statement. His voice broke on, "nephew," before he could finish. The little boy, cape still on, stood up on a folding chair and shouted, "My mom can't afford grapes." It wasn't eloquent. It was perfect. The twist. A week later, the city waived the fines on the condition that the parsonage be deeded to the church as affordable housing permanently. Anthony protested. His parents signed, tears in their eyes. He lost the neon sign and his brand. The pantry got a new fridge from a stranger who saw the kids' video. Sometimes the miracle arrives with a zoning code attached. Story 9. At the auction house, my job is to make sure rich people's impulses match the paperwork. During the spring sale, a man named Julian breezed in with sunglasses he refused to remove indoors. He registered as Paddle 312 with a bank letter from his parents' private branch and a note. Family will guarantee funds. The parents' names were old money, the kind that makes specialists lean forward. Lot 72 was the star, a maritime painting rumored to be the last canvas by a regional master. The estimate was aggressive. Bidding started high and then went higher, with Julian slicing the air like he was conducting something eternal. Hammer fell at a number that made the room exhale. He posed for photos, kissed the air, promised a museum loan. I stamped, sold. 48 hours later, compliance pinged me. The funds hadn't arrived. The bank said the parents' trust had declined to honor the guarantee. We didn't approve this, the father's lawyer wrote. Our son misunderstood the scope. Our terms are clear. The underbidder had moved on. We were entitled to chase the difference. We filed. The parents, desperate to prevent public scandal, covered part of it while their counsel wrangled. Then the part became a pit. They liquidated, then leveraged, then filed Chapter 11 to stay enforcement. The art world kept gossip warm. Here's where it turns. In reconciling the catalog, I noticed a discrepancy in the provenance note, an estate label on the stretcher that didn't match the paperwork. I pulled the intake photos. Under the top label was another older tag with a name I recognized from my internship, a small-town museum in whose archive I'd once cataloged a different painting. I called a curator friend. She texted me a grainy photo of a deaccessioned picture with the same frame scars. We compared woodworm patterns like fingerprints. Lot 72 wasn't the rumored masterpiece. It was a clever swap, costly but not historic. I told legal. They told consignment. The consignor's attorney imploded, then settled, then vanished. We adjusted the value down and refunded the differential to the parents' estate. Too late to fix what the bankruptcy had already set in motion. Julian came to collect anyway, sunglasses on, and asked for a discount on future business. I watched the art handlers crate a painting whose story had bankrupted the wrong people. As he turned to go, his mother stepped out of the elevator in court clothes and looked at the canvas like a mirror. "You've always loved ships," she said to him, and then to me. "Please send the bill to me. He can't sail without sinking us." I wanted to say the ocean doesn't care who you are. Instead, I printed the release and handed her a pen. Story 10. I used to share a screen printing studio with my ex, Naya, whose parents graded love in limited editions. When she wanted a clothing brand, they leased a warehouse and signed a personal guarantee because entrepreneurship runs in the family. It did, if entitlement counts as a business model. I designed. She curated. We picked a name, Nice Try, with a smiley somewhere between wink and dare. At a trade show, Naya fell in love with a global sportswear logo. "We'll riff," she said. "Parody is protected." Our riff looked like a trace. I begged her to change it. She sent a laughing emoji and ordered 20,000 units. Her parents prepaid the supplier and bragged at dinners that they were angel investors. Angels don't usually co-sign inventory loans. Devils in debt do. We launched with a pop-up that did numbers. Then the letter arrived. Not a DMCA, but a full-throated trademark suit from a company with more lawyers than we had boxes. Naya called it free press and posted the letter with clown horns over the logo. The company filed for an injunction the next day. We shut down. Our supplier wanted their balance. The bank wanted the interest. Naya's parents posted a photo of a sunset and filed for bankruptcy. The baby shower came 3 months later because life doesn't wait for cap tables. Naya's sister had the baby. The warehouse was the only space big enough. We set up streamers between unsold boxes wrapped in plastic like they were sleeping. Someone hired a balloon arch. I brought a onesie with our original safe logo as a gag and a peace offering. Halfway through, guess the baby food. A courier walked in with a stack of papers. He looked around at the cake and the diaper raffle and said, "Is there a Naya here?" She squealed and clapped. She loves a grand entrance. He handed her a contempt motion. She'd kept selling parody out the back after the injunction. The motion was stapled to screenshots of her burner site and TikToks from the party, with guests tagging the racks in the background. "Warehouse sale today?" Her mother sank into a folding chair like the air had been pulled out of the room. Her father tried to hand the courier a cupcake. The courier didn't take it. Naya said, "They can't do this at a baby shower." The courier said, "They can do it anywhere you keep breaking the law." The twist. As guests shuffled out, a quiet woman from the sportswear company's team approached Naya's mom. She set down a gift bag. Inside was a check, not to Naya, but to the bankruptcy estate, for the value of the unsold infringing goods if surrendered for destruction, plus a licensing stipend for our original logo to help pay creditors. It wasn't mercy. It was math and PR. Naya grabbed for the bag. Her mother pulled it away and said, "This is the last thing of yours I'm going to hold." Then she handed me the check and asked if I still had the screens for the logo that didn't steal. I did. Sometimes the only way through a mess is to print a new run and call it what it is. A second chance her parents bought again, with everything. Story 11. I handle billing at a mom-and-pop internal medicine clinic run by Dr. and Mrs. Peralta. He's the physician, she's the office boss, and their son, Jonah, helped with IT after flaming out of a tech boot camp his parents paid for twice. He installed a shiny new EHR and told us to trust the workflow. For a while, collections looked great, too great. Mrs. P brought cupcakes when our reimbursements doubled. "Finally, modernizing," she said, frosting on her sleeve. Then we got the letter, a targeted Medicare audit, outlier billing patterns. I printed encounter lists and felt my stomach do a slow backflip. The same 20 last names kept appearing. Elderly patients with suspiciously identical symptom clusters treated on holidays and Sundays when our doors were locked. Worse, some visits overlapped with times the doctor was, per his calendar, grilling in his backyard. We gathered in the windowless audit room with a guy from the Zone Program Integrity contractor who didn't blink. He slid over a spreadsheet, dates, CPT codes, device IDs for the EHR logins. Each visit had been created after midnight by a user tagged Admin J, Jonah. Dr. Peralta stared like he was trying to reset reality by squinting. When the auditor asked to contact a random patient to verify care, we watched him dial. On speaker, an old voice answered and said, soft, steady, "That's me. But I haven't seen the doctor in 3 years." The name was Dr. Peralta's own father. Ghost patients weren't strangers. They were family, neighbors, the bingo crowd from church. Jonah had lifted demographics from our recall list and billed infusions we don't even perform. A common optimization. He shrugged when confronted, like fraud was a plug-in. Clawbacks hit like a tsunami. The feds demanded repayment plus penalties. Private plans piled on. The clinic's accounts drained to bones. Dr. P mortgaged the building. It wasn't enough. Mrs. P filed a personal bankruptcy because she'd personally guaranteed the EHR financing and a coding consultant line of credit Jonah opened under her email. The twist arrived at our kitchen table. Dr. Peralta brought a faded folder, hands shaking. Inside were handwritten soap notes from Sundays, real visits, house calls to homebound patients he never billed because neighbors are neighbors. He'd recorded them out of habit, never seeking a dime. The auditor accepted those as proof of some care, but not most. Looking stricken, the doctor said, "I kept the wrong notes. I didn't keep track of my son." Jonah hired a lawyer and posted about overcriminalization. Mrs. P showed up to bankruptcy court with cupcake tins and no frosting. We switched off the EHR and went back to paper charts. Trust doesn't have a button to click. Story 12. I'm the kind. We started getting noise complaints about a stately old Victorian on Blythe Street, crowds on weeknights, suitcase trains every Friday. When I visited, a man in a silk robe, Rory, opened the door and called the foyer his hospitality startup. The deed said the house belonged to his parents. Rory waved a laminated power of attorney and said, "I optimize idle assets." Translation: he chopped a single-family home into 8 illegal mini-suites, hardwired locks, and installed a bare-knuckle electrical panel that hummed like a threat. Cease and desist orders boomeranged off his ego. He relisted under new host names and handed out Wi-Fi like confetti. The fines mounted daily, then hourly when he ignored a stop work. His parents came to my office, polite, tired, wearing the "we raised him" apology, and said Rory assured them the city had partnered with him. I pointed to the red letters on our notice. They nodded and left hollow. The crescendo was an emergency council hearing after an out-of-town guest posted a viral video of a sparking outlet and a hallway that looked like a submarine. Rory took the podium in a cape, not kidding, and riffed about legacy zoning suppressing young entrepreneurship. A woman named Harini, whose mother lived next door, spoke after him and held up a charred extension cord in a Ziploc. Council voted to authorize immediate enforcement. We put a bright orange condemned sign on the porch. 50 minutes later, a van pulled up with new tourists and rolling bags. Rory tried to sneak them in through the alley. My colleague clicked her pen, and the police taped the door like it was a crime scene because it was. Here's the twist. The parents thought their paid-off house was a castle. It was a guarantee for a reverse mortgage Rory had quietly triggered with his POA and a forged occupancy affidavit. The lender called the loan when the condemnation hit. The parents, both retired teachers, couldn't satisfy it. Bankruptcy followed. At the 341 meeting, the trustee asked why they hadn't revoked Rory's POA. The mother said, "It was notarized at our kitchen table. He brought cookies." She still had the plate. By spring, the house sold to pay the estate. Harini's mother cried in the driveway watching the orange tape come down. Rory started a podcast about regulatory capture. We changed the code to make POA abuse an explicit factor for revoking rental permits. On my last pass-by, someone had planted tomatoes in the yard. Law and tomatoes both grow with stakes. Story 13. I agreed to be volunteer treasurer for a school board candidate because how hard could it be? Then I met Violet, a candidate with a ring light and a whiteboard that said Vision. Her parents, retired hoteliers, bankrolled the kickoff. "Loans," they said cheerfully, signing the forms like a guest book. We opened a committee account. Small donations trickled in. Big checks from her parents gushed, $25K, then $50K as bridge loans. Violet spent like an incumbent with a mandate. Consultants with glossy decks, billboards that made her look like a morning show anchor, catered listening salons. I entered receipts and tried to breathe around the numbers. 3 weeks before Election Day, our bank flagged cash withdrawals from the campaign, 5 in one weekend, maxed out each time at different branches. Violet said it was for volunteer stipends. I demanded receipts. She handed me handwritten IOUs with identical handwriting and the same spelling mistake. Stipend. The ethics board sent us a scary letter. I started checking vendors. A huge line item was print collateral at a shop called Ink Credible. I called to confirm. The owner said, "Oh, yeah, and thanks for paying the invoice twice. Once from the committee, once from Violet's mom." He sounded puzzled. I was too, until he added, "We delivered 2 sets of mailers. The second had the slate card with the fake union logo. That was a no-no. Bigger. No-no. Using campaign funds to pay the same private vendor your parent used to launder an in-kind expenditure already over the legal limit." At the Ethics Commission hearing, Violet's parents sat front row. Perfect posture. The investigator rolled in a cart with a printer on it. "We subpoenaed your design files," she said, and pressed a button. The printer coughed out a test page listing job histories and usernames embedded in the PDFs. Each job was tagged with a Windows user. Violet Mom. The dates matched our withdrawals. The amount over the limit triggered automatic treble fines. The room inhaled. Violet's parents exhaled a mortgage. They sold a vacation condo to cover penalties. Even that didn't equal the bill. Bankruptcy filings surfaced online the day before the election. Violet lost by 9 points and blamed dark money. The twist? 2 months later, the print shop owner sent me a Christmas card with a photocopy of one last log. The night we went over budget. Violet Dad. Printing yard signs that read, "Write in Violet if disqualified." He'd planned a workaround. Regulations didn't bankrupt them. Their daughter's Plan B did. Story 14. My job is to make sure loud events don't burn down buildings. A regional esports tournament booked our biggest haul. The organizer, Evan, mid-20s, hoodie printed with his own face. His deck promised sponsors, prize pools, and Tier 1 production. The contract required proof of funds and event insurance. The proof arrived via a line of credit guaranteed by his parents' home. I frowned. He smiled. They believe in me. Load-in day. Nothing believed in anyone. Half the PCs were rentals. Half were loaners from a local LAN cafe. The stage truss was rated for less than the LED wall. The broadcast truck was a van with a laptop. I insisted on fixes. Evan nodded and posted an Instagram story about haters. The first bracket started. Streams crashed. Players tweeted. Sponsors called. I paced with a radio glued to my ear while Evan juggled excuses like flaming pins. At 6 p.m., the prize pool wire hadn't hit the escrow account. Our finance office threatened to cut the lights if the security deposit didn't replenish. Evan's mother appeared at the registration desk, cheeks flushed, clutching a cashier's check. He promised the sponsor's wire is in the morning, she said. We extended mercy until morning. It didn't arrive. At noon, I gathered the team leads and announced we'd finished the current matches and shut down. Evan tried to grab the mic and rally the crowd. A player with a neon mouse flipped him off. Boos. The screen went dark, mid-map. The crowd out at the loading dock, staring at a row of cases like unplayed instruments, Evan's father approached me with a paper bag. "You're the only adult," he said. Inside was a copy of their HELOC, maxed to fund appearance fees that were actually Evan's crypto losses. He'd promised to win it back, running an arbitrage bot. Instead, he arbitraged his parents' retirement into mist. We canceled the finals and called it a day. Lawsuits flew, sponsors for breach, players for travel, the city for police overtime after an angry crowd. The parents filed for bankruptcy to stop the foreclosure clock. Evan went live that night from a bedroom lit blue, blaming a targeted campaign. The twist came months later at a different event. A kid approached me, eyes bright, and said, "I'm Evan's brother." He told them he'd jump if they didn't co-sign. He practiced on the railing so they'd believe him. The kid's voice cracked. He doesn't even like heights. I stood in a cavernous hall, 1,000 LEDs blinking like accusation, and realized the most dangerous equipment on any show isn't the truss. It's a threat wielded by someone who was never told no.